I leaned against the glass railing of my club's private balcony. The city spread beneath me like a glittering ocean of lights. The bass from inside pulsed through the floor, steady and alive, like the heartbeat of everything I'd built. My silk blouse clung coolly against my skin, the faint trace of my perfume mixing with a sharp bite of champagne in my hand. From up here, I could see the velvet ropes at the entrance. A line of guests stretched down the block, all desperate for a chance to step inside. But my eyes froze on a group standing right at the front, faces I knew all too well. Melissa, Ryan, even Daniel. The ones who once laughed at me, who brushed off my invitation years ago like it was an inconvenience. They'd said I was trying too hard, that I'd never make it, that my little dream was beneath them. And now here they were, dressed to impress, voices dripping with fake confidence, whispering to the bouncer, trying to get in. The irony wasn't lost on me. I sipped slowly, letting the bubbles burn down my throat. They had refused my invitation when I was nobody. Now the rules were different. Now this was my club, my world, my rules. And tonight, they wouldn't be getting past those doors. I can still remember the night as if it were yesterday. It was my 22nd birthday, and I had saved for weeks to rent out a small hall at a neighborhood community center in Brooklyn. It wasn't glamorous, beige walls, folding chairs, and cheap string lights I hung myself, but to me, it was magic. I had worked so hard planning that evening. I wanted it to be more than just a party. I wanted it to be the first step in sharing my dream, opening a space where music, art, and people could come alive together. I sent out invitations with hope tucked into every word. Melissa was my closest friend back then, at least I thought she was. Ryan and Daniel were people I trusted, the ones who always had advice, even if it was sharp. I asked them to come, to just stand by me, to believe in me for one night. But one by one, the rejections rolled in. Sorry, I'm busy. That's not really my scene. Maybe next time. Melissa was the cruelest. She laughed and said, "A club? You? Please. Nobody's going to show up for that." The words stung worse than I let on. I nodded, pretending it didn't matter. But when the night came, I stood there alone. The cake untouched. The candles unlit. My hands shook as I poured myself a plastic cup of cheap soda, trying to swallow the lump in my throat. I felt invisible. Small. Like maybe they were right. But then I remembered something my grandmother, Eleanor, had once told me when I was just a girl sitting on her porch in Georgia. If they won't give you a seat at their table, sweetheart, build your own table. One day, they'll beg for a chair. That memory lit a fire in me. My grandmother had pressed a small silver locket into my hand that summer, engraved with a single word, "Rise." I still wore it that night, holding it between my fingers as I blinked away tears. Standing in that empty hall, I made a quiet promise to myself. I would never again beg anyone to believe in me. I would build something so undeniable, so unshakable, that the very people who rejected me would one day be the ones standing outside, waiting to be let in. And I would decide who got through the door. The morning after that empty birthday hall, I woke up with swollen eyes and a heart that felt hollow. But something inside me had shifted. Their rejection had hurt, yes, but it had also cleared the air. I no longer needed to chase their approval. I pulled my grandmother's silver locket around my neck and went to work. Not at an office or a shiny startup, but at a dingy little cafe on 7th Avenue where I waitressed 6 days a week. My tips barely covered rent, but I listened closely to the music that filled the place. Live bands came through on Fridays, and I'd linger after my shift, watching the crowd lose themselves in the sound. That energy, that release, that connection, that was what I wanted to create. One night, an older woman named Patricia, who ran the cafe's small booking schedule, noticed me scribbling notes on napkins. She asked, "What are you always writing?" Blushing, I told her about my dream, a place that wasn't just a bar, wasn't just a club, but something alive, a space where people could feel like they belonged. Instead of laughing, Patricia leaned back, studied me, and said, "Then stop talking about it and start building it. Start small. Book a room. Host a night. Test yourself." She became my quiet mentor. She showed me how to talk to performers, how to negotiate with vendors, how to make budgets stretch until they begged for mercy. She wasn't warm, not in the soft grandmotherly way, but she believed in me. Sometimes belief is the only oxygen a dream needs. It wasn't glamorous at first. I rented a basement space beneath an old laundromat for $300 a month. The walls smelled faintly of detergent, the ceiling leaked when it rained, and the only lighting came from a string of fairy bulbs I found at a flea market. But when the first local band played there, with just 12 people in the audience, I felt a rush I can't put into words. From that night forward, I hustled. I worked double shifts. I learned to market on social media. I begged DJs and bands to trust me, promising exposure I barely had to offer. I painted walls myself, scrubbed floors until my hands cracked, and stayed awake until dawn, planning and replanning every detail. There were setbacks. Oh, plenty. Nights when nobody showed up. Nights when equipment broke. Nights when the power went out and I cried in the dark, wondering if I was chasing a fantasy. But there were also moments that stitched me back together. Like when a stranger told me, "This place feels like home." Or when I handed out my first flyers and someone actually came back. Every dollar I made, I reinvested. Slowly, the basement space grew. Word of mouth carried further than I expected. First 20 people, then 50, then lines forming outside on Friday nights. I upgraded to a bigger venue, then another. Through it all, I stayed quiet online. Melissa and the others probably thought I was still that girl chasing pipe dreams. I posted nothing but coffee mugs and sunsets, never letting on what was really happening. But in reality, brick by brick, night by night, I was building an empire. My own table, my own club. And soon, the world would know whose name was written on the door. The night the past came knocking was one of our busiest Fridays. My club, Rise, had become one of the most exclusive spots in Manhattan. Celebrities came for the music, CEOs came for the networking, and influencers came just to snap a picture under the neon sign that glowed above the entrance. If they said no, build your own. I stood near the second-floor lounge, a glass of Pinot Grigio in hand, the city skyline winking at me through the floor-to-ceiling windows. From up there, I could see the velvet ropes, the line curving down the block, the photographers flashing cameras. My staff moved like clockwork, polished, precise, and loyal. Every detail was mine. The golden chandeliers, the custom murals from local artists, even the velvet couches that made people sink deeper into conversations they didn't want to end. And then I saw them. Melissa, Ryan, and Daniel. At first, I thought my mind was playing tricks on me. But no, it was them. Dressed sharp, eyes darting toward the bouncers, their voices just a little too eager. They were laughing, trying to look casual, but there was a nervous energy in the way they held themselves. They had no idea whose world they were about to step into. I didn't rush down. No, I let them wait. I wanted them to feel the weight of not being chosen. From my vantage point, I saw the moment Melissa pulled out her phone, trying to call someone she thought might get her in. Ryan leaned against the rope, flashing his watch like the bouncer might suddenly recognize him as someone important. Daniel whispered something, his jaw tightening when the guard shook his head. Finally, I signaled to Marcus, my head of security. He nodded and led them through the ropes, up the stairs, and into the private lounge. They walked in, laughter plastered on their faces, but it died the second they saw me. "Claire?" Melissa blinked, her voice caught between surprise and disbelief. "Yes," I said, swirling my glass slowly. "Welcome to my club." Silence hung heavy for a moment. They glanced around, at the marble floors, the glowing bar stocked with bottles from every corner of the world, the VIP crowd leaning in on velvet couches. I watched as realization hit them. This is yours." Daniel finally asked. "All of it." I let the words roll off my tongue, calm and deliberate. "Every light, every song, every corner you see mine." Melissa's lips parted, but no words came out. Her eyes darted to the plaque on the wall, engraved in bold letters, "Founder and owner, Claire Hamilton." I didn't smile. I didn't need to. Their shame was enough. "You know," I continued. There was a time I invited you to be part of something small. Something that mattered to me. You turned me down. Mocked me, even. My gaze lingered on Melissa, whose face was turning red. Now look where we are. Ryan cleared his throat, trying to recover. Claire, come on, we didn't mean anything by it. We just… Just what? I cut in, my voice sharp enough to slice through the music. Didn't believe in me? Didn't think I was worth your time? That's fine. But tonight you'll understand what it means to be on the other side of the door. The room went quiet again, except for the low thrum of music beneath us. I took another sip of wine, savoring the silence that pressed down on them. For years, I had carried their rejection like a scar. But standing there in my world, in my power, it didn't feel like a scar anymore. It felt like armor. And I wasn't done yet. Melissa was the first to break the silence. She set her clutch on the table, forcing a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Claire, listen, we were young. We didn't understand. But clearly you've done amazing things. Her gaze flicked around the lounge, as if the crystal glasses and velvet curtains could soften the sting of her words. Maybe we can put the past behind us? I leaned back in my chair, crossing my legs. My heels tapped against the marble floor, steady as a metronome. Put the past behind us? I repeated softly, tasting the irony. You mean erase the nights I cried myself to sleep? Or the years I carried your words like weights on my chest? Ryan sighed, trying to take the role of peacemaker. Look, Claire, we get it. You've made it. And honestly, good for you. But don't you think holding a grudge, it's kind of petty? I tilted my head, watching him squirm. Petty, I echoed.
Funny.
When you refused my invitation back then, did you think that was petty? Or was that just convenient? His jaw tightened. He didn't answer. Daniel stayed quiet, but I could see guilt shadowing his face. He shifted uncomfortably, fingers drumming against the armrest. Finally, he spoke. So, what now? Are you saying we're not allowed in? I smiled, slow and deliberate. I'm saying entry to my club, my world, comes with conditions. Their eyes widened, but I didn't flinch. I set my glass down, the crystal ringing softly against the table. Melissa, I began, locking eyes with her. You'll never talk down to another woman chasing her dream again. You'll encourage her, even if it sounds impossible. Because I remember exactly how it felt when you laughed at mine. Her lips trembled, and for once, she had no comeback. I turned to Ryan. You love to call people petty? Then here's your condition. Learn humility. You don't get to dismiss people just because they're climbing a rung you're not on. Until you can do that, you'll always be stuck outside looking in. His face darkened, but he stayed silent. Finally, Daniel. I softened slightly, because his rejection had been quieter, less cruel. You'll stop hiding behind silence. You didn't mock me, but you didn't stand up for me either. Sometimes silence wounds deeper than words. If you want entry here, you learn to speak, to stand, not just for yourself, but for others. Daniel swallowed hard, nodding slowly. I let the moment hang, their guilt filling the air like smoke. Then I leaned forward, my voice low but steady. I don't need your apologies. I don't need your validation. What I need is proof.
Change.
Show me you've learned. Show me you've grown. Until then, I gestured toward the doors with a flick of my wrist. This club isn't for you. Melissa's eyes glistened, Ryan clenched his jaw, and Daniel simply bowed his head. For the first time, I wasn't begging them to see me. I was teaching them how to see themselves. And that was a power I had never known I possessed. Weeks passed after that night, and life at Rise settled into a rhythm that felt like home. Melissa stopped by once, not to beg, but to volunteer to help organize an art night for local female musicians. Ryan started mentoring interns at his firm, teaching them the lessons he wished someone had taught him. Daniel joined a community group, finally speaking up instead of hiding behind silence. I watched these changes quietly, without fanfare, letting them grow at their own pace. The power I held that night wasn't in forcing them to see me, but in giving them a chance to see themselves. I hadn't needed to humiliate anyone. The lessons had landed naturally because the door was mine to open or to close. Alone in my office one evening, I held my grandmother's silver locket again. The word rise glimmered in the soft lamplight. I traced the letters with my thumb and smiled. It had guided me from that lonely Brooklyn birthday to this empire of music, art, and possibility. From rejection to triumph, it had always reminded me of one truth. The only person who decides your worth is you. I leaned back in my chair, the city lights painting long stripes across the floor, and let myself breathe. The hurt I had carried for years had transformed into something powerful, not just success, but clarity. Not just independence, but grace. I had built my table, my club, my sanctuary, and I could finally watch the world come to it on its own terms. And as the hum of music floated up from the main room, laughter and chatter intertwining with the bass, I felt a peace I had never known. Those who had refused me years ago were learning their own lessons. Some might eventually earn a seat, some might never. It no longer mattered. I fastened the locket around my neck, feeling the familiar weight against my chest, and whispered to myself, as if the city could hear. They refused my invitation once. Now they can't enter my club. It wasn't revenge. It wasn't anger. It was strength. It was freedom. It was the story I had always meant to tell.